I am totally psyched for this speech.
Active audience, active audience.
We're alive. Mannequins. So.
Hi, my name is April Jones. For my husband and I, preparedness is a lifestyle. Richard and I moved to Florida in 2004. We moved into our home 2 days before 3 major hurricanes slammed into Florida. The 3 hurricanes were Category 3s, and they happened 2 weeks after the other. So we had 3. We had Francis, we had Charlie, and then we had Jean, and Hurricane Jean was the size of Texas. In the year of 2005, we enjoyed a visit from Dennis, Katrina, and then we had a visit from Wilma. Wilma was a slow-moving, severe storm that brought flooding into the area. The hardest hit area for Wilma was West Palm Beach, where my sister lives. Dawn and Kevin were without electricity for 3 weeks, and they were without water. The water systems, the reason that the water was down in Florida was because there was so much flooding and the sewage had overflowed and contaminated the community and city waters. So luckily for them, they were used to living in Florida, so they had a generator and they were able to pump water from their well. Because I experienced this catastrophe firsthand, I'm convinced of the motto that Adam Francis of Equipped to Endure says: if you're not always prepared, you're never prepared. Hurricane Sandy 2 weeks ago slammed into the mid-Atlantic, pouring snow, ice, and rain on the people of New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. Those people, 8 million people in the rain-soaked darkness, not prepared for the storm. Not only was it a hurricane, it was coupled by 2 or 3 other storms that made it more severe, and it was cold. It was 20 degrees, so people were without their homes. They were outside trying to survive in the weather. About an hour or 2 after the storm subsided, CBS New York came on and was already talking about looting in the area and that people were already arming themselves to protect their homes and their families, and more than that, they were protecting their generators. I pulled an article that was written by the news editor of Town Hall magazine. It was written on November 5th by Katie Pavlik, and I want to read what she wrote. It's just an excerpt. It said, "The storm hit 1 week ago. What is the status of the state's hardest hit? Dire. There are still 2.5 million without power, and temperatures have dipped into the 20s. Another powerful storm is blowing up the coast and expected to hit the region by midweek. Bodies are still being recovered in Staten Island. Chaos reigns in the streets of the outer boroughs. Residents have taken up arms, baseball bats, machetes, shotguns as crime and looting soar. Handmade signs popped up. Looters will be shot, and block protected by Smith & Wesson. It's like the Wild West, a borderline lawless situation," said one resident as he stockpiled knives, a machete, and a bow and arrow. That brings it to reality, doesn't it? Benjamin Franklin said that by failing to prepare, you prepare to fail. The people in Mississippi and New Orleans, they were warned that the storm was coming. Those who did not heed the evacuation orders were not prepared for the devastation, the chaos, or the lawlessness that followed Hurricane Katrina. They were left without water, they were left without power, they were left without food. Emergency supplies did not come. If you remember that time, you remember the news reports, the criticizing of FEMA, because FEMA didn't come to the rescue. So there was nobody there to rescue them, which should be a lesson to you all. Don't depend on the government to come rescue you. Prepare yourselves for calamity, at least until rescue can come. They were not prepared. Within hours of the storm, armed thugs and gang members hit the streets with guns and chains, and they began murdering, raping, and looting the citizens of New Orleans. It was so bad there that even the police officers walked off of the job because they couldn't control the mobs, and they felt like they more needed to take care of their homes and their families. It was a devastating thing. New Orleans looked like a third world country, like a war zone, and there was no help for the people anywhere. 80,000 people were sent to the Superdome, and within an hour of the Superdome being filled, headline news spoke of rapes and murder within the Superdome. Okay, in a situation like this, the last place you want to be is out on the street looking for food and water for your family because you didn't prepare ahead of time for a storm you knew was coming. So it leads to the question, when nature's wrath comes your way, are you prepared to hunker down for days, maybe weeks, until order can be restored or help comes? Cody London, who is a survivalist and the author of a book called 98.6 Degrees, The Art of Keeping Your Ass Alive. It's the name of the book. He says that the average catastrophe lasts about 72 hours, and that's the average. I've just given you 2 examples where it lasted weeks. So, at minimum, you need to prepare for a 72-hour catastrophe. So you ask yourself, if you've never done it before, how do I begin to prepare? Well, you can start asking yourself about the things that you don't think you can live without, or how long can you live without them. So we're going to talk about those things. First, water. The standard water supply that you need to store is 2 gallons per person per day. So bottled water is essential. Don't depend on a water supply that depends on electricity. I was so happy when we moved to Missouri because we had a well, and then I realized that we need electricity to pump the well. So don't depend on that for water. Water supplies also become contaminated. There are a lot of ways to clean your water. You can buy filters to clean your water. 2-micron filters will do that. You can boil water. There are water purification tablets, which you should have in your supply. And something else to mention about water when you go to supply, if you're like my husband and I, if my house gets hit by a storm, we're going to be proactive. We're going to be outside. We're going to be working, trying to clean up our property. You're going to want extra water for that, so prepare. And you're going to need food. Don't depend on food in your freezer. That's obvious. When you really think about it, your electricity goes out, your food's going to spoil. And not only that, the food in your freezer, most of that has to be cooked. So you want food that is easy to prepare, no cooking. You want it to be portable. The best thing you could do is store dehydrated food, freeze-dried foods. These foods, while yes, they do require water, if you plan ahead of time, you can store enough water for your food supply. So water can be essential, but there's a lot of sources of water. And you want to be able to use and rotate that. The other thing about dehydrated foods is that it's portable. Should you need to evacuate, you don't want to be having to haul cases of canned food out when you can pack these things in a pack and go. You know, when the water's rising up around your ankles, sometimes you just need to go. So that is essential. The other essential item that you're going to need is fire. While fire is a comfort, it is also a survival item. Those people in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, 20 degrees, you need fire. Fire, you can keep yourself warm, you can survive. You can heat water to decontaminate your water, and you can prepare food. So heat is essential. Thermal blankets. Also with fire, waterproof matches. In your supply, you can have a Bic or one of those fire sticks, but they run off of a fuel that's going to run out. If the roof is ripped off of your house and it's raining inside your house, you're going to appreciate waterproof matches. I think that's an essential item for fire. We don't want to forget light. A flashlight, simply, for every member of the family. And fresh batteries. Keep your batteries fresh by rotating your batteries out. These are essential survival items. You want to have first aid. You can buy a first aid kit at Walmart if you don't want to make one, but you need to have some type of bandaging, antibiotic ointment, maybe burn cream on hands, splinting. My husband builds his own first aid kit, but you can certainly buy one, and it's an essential item. Important documents. Anitra Kerr, the founder of Simply Living Smart, believes that all of your important documents should be in a grab-and-go format. She likes a binder. She says, you know, you put everything in a binder, things that you can't be without, passports, birth certificates, insurance, life insurance, things that you would not want to leave behind and never see again. Those things need to be in a grab-and-go format. And since we're talking about grab-and-go, let's talk about evacuation. When you know a Cat 5 hurricane is barreling down your path, go to the gas station and fill your gas tank and all your gas cans. If nothing else, if you don't have to evacuate, at least you have fuel to run your generator. But you don't want to be caught without fuel if you need to go. The people in Katrina, the ones that evacuated, they had to go sometimes 300 miles before they could find a hotel. How far can you go on a half tank of gas? You need fuel. You need to be prepared for these things. And if you've not heard anything else I said, the most important thing you need to remember is practice, practice, practice. It doesn't do you any good to have all these things if you don't use them. Eat your food storage and replace it. You know, you never know. There could be a lot of foods in there you don't like, and there's nothing worse than being in a crisis situation eating food that you don't enjoy eating. There should be some comforts when you're in a crisis. So rotate your food source. Take your family camping. Go on a primitive camping trip. Use your supplies. Learn how to build a fire. Learn how to use your supplies. Okay. So there may be some of you here saying, well, all this survival stuff is not for me. Well, you know what? There were a lot of millions of cold, hungry people who thought the exact same thing. But the truth is, catastrophe happens. Katrina was one of the worst storms to ever hit the United States, according to Live Science. Thousands were trapped. Thousands were trapped not just because they chose to be, but because they couldn't get out and there was no help. They were not prepared for the crisis they were in. The historian Thomas Fuller said, "In fair weather, prepare for foul." Now is the time to prepare. You don't want to be out there when a storm's on the way, fighting and elbowing in with all those people who have not prepared when the shelves are bare. And you don't want to sit in gas lines for 3 or 4 miles to be the one who gets to the pump when it runs dry. You don't have to do that when you can simply just prepare. I would agree that many have survived without these items, but you know what? It was hard for them. If you have these items, you're prepared. Most importantly, you are safe because you're not out in the danger zone trying to find supplies. You're going to be more comfortable, and your personal crisis can be virtually eliminated. Thank you.